first and foremost, I appreciate you coming on the show. Your time I know is valuable, so I appreciate
No,
that.
thank you for having me. I appreciate you asking me.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. So I guess just to kind of start off, like, what got you into like fitness and training and everything like that?
So I was always athletic. I was a competitive dancer for 16 years.
Hmm.
I competed in horseback riding as well. I also played lacrosse. I played volleyball, and I was always very athletic. And I was in a relationship at the time before I started bodybuilding, and I just like started going to the gym. So I like didn't know really what I was doing. And the guy that I was with at the time knew some things. So I was learning off of him
Hmm.
and just kind of doing our own thing at the time. And then when we broke up, I was like, like I really just let myself go because I was training, but I wasn't really eating right. So Instagram was kind of just new at the time. And I was following this girl, Alyssa, who I shout out all the time. She literally changed my life in fitness.
Mm.
And she was competing for her first show in October. This is when I was living in New Haven. And I immediately like messaged her. I said, "You look amazing. Like, what are you doing? Are you competing?" I actually went to her show that same year and I just absolutely fell in love with fitness, competing, the whole atmosphere, because that for me is like dance all over again.
Right.
So I like started there and kind of worked my way up.
So what division were you competing in?
Bikini, since I've been
Bikini.
bikini since day one.
Was there like a particular reason why you chose that division as opposed to like figure or anything else?
I think figure is beautiful. I think figure is elegant. I did want to do figure at one point. I just didn't know if I wanted to commit to all that size, especially
Hmm.
on off season. But when I lean down, my legs get really, really tiny when I lean down. So it just made sense to stick with bikini at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Your dog wants to get in there too.
So
Uh,
true, right?
That's funny. So yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned you were training, but you like weren't eating right. I think that's like kind of the easiest trap to fall into, right? Because people enjoy training so much. Like for the most part, like the most enjoyable part of being fit or being in the fitness industry is the training. It's not the
Yeah.
eating, right? So the eating is the worst.
It is. I was in college at the time. I was living on campus before I like commuted from back home. So me being on campus, finding food to fit my macros is really hard. So I lived 25 minutes from home. Like how stupid of me to go live on campus 25 minutes down the road from where I live. Spend all this money for nothing, right? So I had my mom make all my food. I said, I need you to make me rice. I think I did like brown rice, wild rice, and like shrimp. And I just like
Mhm.
put shrimp and rice in a bowl, didn't measure it, and just was like eating it. Just like,
Right,
okay, like this is right. It's clean, but
right,
I didn't have
right.
the macros, right? So, but I mean, I made progress, but not like you do when
Yeah.
you do it.
Yeah, see, that's another problem that I find that I run into with people when I speak to them, or if I like give them a diet. A lot of times their thinking is, well, I'm eating like what is considered to be like good foods, right? Like you would think shrimp and rice. I mean, doesn't sound like a terrible choice to make, but it's also like the amount of food that you eat makes a difference, right? Even if your caloric expenditure as opposed to like what you're taking in is a big thing too, not just the macros. Do you strictly adhere to your macros, or do you follow calories as well? Because some people do both, some people do one or the other.
Right. I was never one to track my calories.
Hmm.
I personally, I didn't care what my calories were.
Right.
Because I had hired a coach to, do my meal preps and my food. So for me, if you're going to give me a set of directions or rules, I'm going to follow them to a T because, I mean, if you're going to go off, it's just not going to work. So I've always followed a meal plan, whatever was in meal one, meal two, meal three, four, etc. I would follow it. So if it was chicken and rice, I was chicken and rice. It wasn't like a chicken and a bagel or, something else.
Hmm.
So I never really followed calories. I mostly did meal plan and macros more so on off season because I had more like fun and it's just fun training with like a Pop Tart before pre-workout sometimes. So I mean, everyone can attest to that.
Right.
Yeah, I've never really tracked my calories
Right.
and people who do that's great, but
Yeah, I
I
guess it's
just,
whatever works for you, whatever keeps you, regimented, so to speak. Yeah. So at this point, I guess, so you started competing, and then like, how many shows did you do? Like, did you continue competing? Are you still competing?
sure. Yeah. So I did my first show in 2016. I did 2 shows after that just to kind of like have
Mhm.
fun. I mean, I'm already lean, might as well do another show.
Right.
And then I took 3 years off. I finished my undergrad, life things. I moved, whatever. And then after 2019, I would say I started prep in March again after like a really serious breakup, which is why I moved to Texas in the first place.
Mm,
So when we had broke up, it was just rough. It was just a hard transition for everything.
right.
So I was like, what a great time to prep at this point. Let's get a routine going. Let's get my mind right. Let's get healthy and just kind of go. Because when you're on prep, you're tunnel vision. Nothing else matters. It's only you, and it's just awesome. So I went straight into a prep 2019. I did 3 shows, one in San Antonio, one at Eastern. Then I went straight to nationals and won my pro card in 2019.
Mm.
And then 2020 did my pro debut in at the Chicago Pro, and then I did San Antonio Classic, and now we're on off season. But that's because of other stuff that happens. I
How
want to still compete for sure.
what would be like your biggest difference as far as like NPC as opposed to IFBB? Was there a difference? Was it a smooth transition, or did you notice like a difference between the amateurs and the pros?
Um, when you step on a pro stage, you're like, oh, okay, like you're with the big dogs. It kind of
Mhm.
hits you that way. I mean, you're backstage and like you're with all these people that you see on social media. Like, oh my god, like I'm where you are right now. It was really like a surreal moment. As opposed to amateurs, I think there's just so many that you kind of get. There's a lot of girls that just get lost in the NPC because there's just so many girls. There's so many shows, et cetera, et cetera. Um, when you win your pro card, like the first time, you are at the bottom. You have to start from the ground up. You're shark bait. You're nothing. So you have to start making a name for yourself again from the bottom up, which was my first take being backstage at the pro. The stage is definitely a lot more competitive. Like the judges are kind of happier when you're NPC because it's fun. But when you get to the pro stage, they're serious. No one's really smiling at you. They're like, okay, like this one's here. Okay, let's move this one. It's so serious. And you can feel it in the room because one, if you win first place, you're going to the Olympia. And everyone wants that first place. So it's really competitive. I would say that's the biggest difference between NPC and IFBB.
I remember recently, within the last 6 months, I would say that Ashley Kaltwasser was winning a lot of shows, and somebody brought up an issue, another competitor, that because she's already won, that she
Mhm.
should limit her level of competition, like amount of competing, so to allow others to have like that opportunity to win. It's kind of like a controversial subject
I agree.
matter. um, and but now I see what you mean. When everybody's gunning for that spot, they feel a little
Yeah.
jaded. What do you think about that? Do you think somebody should just be allowed to compete as much as they want, or once they win they should be kind of limited?
I'm not gonna lie, this has crossed my mind like many times, especially Ashley herself. One, what an awesome athlete, like genetically gifted, great stage
Mhm.
presence, like good for her, like rooting for her all the way. But yeah, my view is okay, like you look great, you're already qualified for the Olympia. Um, and I don't want to be like harsh, but if you've been Miss Olympia X amount of times and then you don't, and then you drop into like the top six, I don't think there's a really good chance that you're going to be Miss Olympia again. But
Mhm.
correct me if I'm wrong. I don't really know. I'm low on the food chain,
Yeah, I mean,
so
I'm even lower than you. I'm not even I'm not even competing in the bikini division.
yeah. So, I mean, that's just my perspective.
Mhm.
But yeah, listen, if you're going to do all these shows, one, good for you. Like your body can handle it. Good for you. But two, like you're just seeing the same faces on the Olympia stage, like barely like new
Right.
faces on the stage. And so I think it's a really unfair advantage to girls who are just starting to like become someone in the IFBB,
Hmm.
you've already made yourself a name for yourself. Like you're already a legend, like 26, 27 shows. Good for you, girl. Like really good for you.
Yeah.
But give these girls a chance to really like step on stage. I mean, we all fought hard to get our pro card for one. Two, we're all trying to get to the Olympia, which doesn't want to go to the Olympia? I mean,
Right.
yeah, I think it does take a disadvantage away from the girls who are there, because I've seen girls who are like second place every show, third place every show, and they just never move up because
Right.
I mean she's there. Um, and I don't want to go and turn it onto like a cocky level and say, well, she's just doing it for the money, or she can, or all these other reasons.
Hmm.
I don't know what the story is. If bodybuilding is all that she has and that's her job and that's her life and that's what she wants to do, more power to you. Go for it. But for girls like myself, and I'm just gonna bring out some names like Carla, love her, that's my girl. Um, Ashlyn Brown, who won one of her shows finally, like well-deserved physiques that just aren't getting the spotlight that they deserve.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's so it's a little interesting.
hard.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
little interesting because so unlike other, so initially my viewpoint was, well, if you can't beat her, then you just can't beat her.
exactly. Yep.
But
I
now, right, but now I'm kind of like I'm talking to you, and now another aspect of it is coming to my mind because bodybuilding is unlike any other sport, right? It's not, you're not putting the ball in a hoop, you're not scoring goals, you're not, there's no concrete like way to win. So a
no,
lot of it depends on your, like you said, your popularity and your level of physique that you've gotten, obviously, but then also just your popularity in the division. And I just don't see anybody, I see your point, I don't see anybody really beating Ashley that's just coming up because she already has a huge name. She's won the Olympia 3 times. There's no judge that's going to put her lower than a girl that's coming up. It's just not going to happen. So anything that she enters, she's going to win, and yeah.
you bring up popularity, and it's so huge because the way that bodybuilding and the whole culture is going right now is not how it was when I first started.
Hmm.
Right now, it's all because social media and this is so big. You got TikTok, you have YouTube. If you're not on any of those, you're a nobody.
Right.
And it's unfortunate because a lot of bodybuilding is how many likes, how much following you have, what influence you have. Um, and then it's you go into the world of genetics. Like Ashley has genetics. You can't find it. She has genetics. And she's beautiful. And bodybuilding is literally 20% genetics and like 80% environmental.
Right.
So she does put in work. Like people who are on, the top 6 in the Olympia, they put in the work, but it's just not as appreciative as it is when I first started. It's all about popularity. And I think a lot of people just shy away from that because not a lot of people are into that. Obviously,
Yeah.
everyone wants to be famous and be an influence. But the art of bodybuilding itself is just not there anymore. It's all about hardcore competition that some of these young girls are just getting consumed by. It's kind of sad.
Yeah.
I mean, being not on the stage for almost a year now and going through like hormonal stuff that I was going through, you really sit back and you look at how the evolution of competing has changed.
Yeah.
And like I said, good for Ashley, but I mean, I want to see some new faces.
Sure, sure.
I'm saying,
It's becoming like, I guess what you're pointing out, it's falling into the traps of what like pageants often fall into the traps of, where it's just all consuming, and then to your point, as far as social media, a lot, you're almost building a brand like for yourself. So it's not really so much as your physique. While that's there, obviously it has to be there, you can't look like trash. It's like a lot of it is what's on top of that physique from a social media standpoint, from a popularity standpoint, and that often makes the difference. um, you look at somebody like Dana Lynn Bailey, who was, got a great physique, but she's as big as she is because she's popular, not because she was so, competitive, let's say. I mean, she did win the Olympia, but she didn't really compete that much after that. I don't think she competed at all. So, so it goes, it goes, to show that there's a lot more involved than just having a great physique and just training. But yeah. So you were talking about the hormones aspect of dealing with all that. And that was initially what I saw like in your stories that I kind of wanted to talk to you about as the main subject matter. Actually, earlier today, I talked to a girl who was also in bikini, and she was dealing with recovering from competing from a hormonal standpoint. And it took her quite a while to get kind of her levels back to normal. Like what was your experience with all that?
So when I've reversed off of show prep, I've always had a hard time. It was never really a smooth transition. There wasn't really an extreme point where I went overboard. But this prep in particular, just, it's hard to describe what really happened. The whole prep during 2020 and quarantine, going on prep, off prep, running stuff, coming off stuff, like it was just like this in the beginning. And then the shows get canceled, and now you're getting pushed back, and now food's getting moved around. All this stuff is happening within 5 months, and we're all confused. And leading into the show, I would say it was like starting at 8 weeks out, I felt things going different. Every prep is different for every girl, but mine was more of a body and mind type of experience. So I was getting super paranoid about things, like super stressed out, really irritable. But in my back of my head, I'm like, this is prep. I'm used to this. This happens. You move on, not thinking anything serious of it. And moving closer to the show, my first show was Chicago Pro. I guess like 4 weeks, 3 weeks out, things obviously get more intense. And there was a point where I remember like walking up to the Stairmaster for morning cardio and just like throwing my waist trainer off the balcony and just screaming like, fuck this, like I'm done. Like I was just a mess that morning. I think it was my 4th day or 5th day on no carbs, the carb cycling. And I had just had it. Like, I don't want to be there. It's 45, 50 minutes of cardio. It happens. And leading up until the show, I was just like, wow, like I got super lean really quick. Like overnight in a week, I was looking nice and full, like could step on stage in a week, to completely like super, super lean, really tiny. And when I won my pro card, I was 113 pounds.
Oh, wow.
So, and that was before I got breast augmentation. So I got surgery done last year in January. The morning I woke up, this was before the panic attack that I had. I think it was the night before Chicago Pro, my pro debut. And I get there and my mom's there and I look at her, I said, something's wrong. And then all of a sudden, like I go into this like severe panic attacks, like severe, where my body was going through it, but my mind wasn't. So usually when you have a panic attack, it's a fight or flight. You're like, okay, I'm going to fight it or I'm going to ride it out and I got to deal with it. This was more of my body's going through something, but my mind's not really caught up on what's really happening. And I'm in a fetal position on the bathroom floor of the hotel. My mom's holding me and she's just like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I have to get my makeup done in an hour for my pro debut. And my tan's pouring off me, like all over the floor. I smelled like ammonia. I called my coach in the middle of the night. I said, listen, I'm having a panic attack. I'm okay, but something is wrong. And I think I laid down for 20 minutes and I go straight to get my makeup done, like didn't sleep at all. And the morning, like stepping on stage for prejudging, could not get a pump. Like I looked good, but I didn't look good and I didn't feel good. Because I step on stage and I can't even get grounded. Like I'm shaking. My body is shaking on stage. I can't get grounded. I have no stability and I'm shaking like this. I can't stand still. In my head, I'm like, hey, like stand still, like hold your pose. Like what's going on? So there just wasn't a mind and body connection that whole week, like for a while after that too.
Interesting. So, I mean, that's super scary. I can't even, imagine. Do you attribute that? So you said there wasn't a body mind connection. Do you attribute that to like the diet? Do you attribute that to nerves? Do you attribute that to PED use? Like what do you think? Or is there a combination of all that put together, just put your body into such a stressful state that you just kind of broke at that point?
So I would say a couple of those. I've always had anxiety. I've always had it. But for competing and even being a dancer for 16 years, me being on, I don't get nervous being on stage like that. Being, show ready, I don't get nervous. I'm actually more calm than anyone that day. But that day in particular just wasn't that case. I don't think I was fed enough. I don't think I went over 110 grams of carbs ever. And then I had no fats for 16 weeks up until peak week. I was taking 20 milligrams of tamoxifen. My Kalene was up at 120 micrograms at one point, which did not need that much. And then Anavar was like 10 milligrams. So I could say it could have been the PEDs. Because when I rebound, a lot of the symptoms that I had were tamoxifen detox related. So I think I can place it in there as well as not enough food, but I don't know.
Probably combination. A combination of the food and
that night. That night before I had that panic attack, I had taken a sleeping pill. I take like an Ativan just in case, like for nerves and stuff, and I could not calm down. My eyes were dilated as if like I was on coke. It was just insane experience.
Was it the only time that you've had that kind of experience up to that point? Like, or, because you've done several shows, right, prior to that. So
I've never had that. I've had, I felt like my gums were receding, my teeth were falling out. I was sweating like pneumonia. It just smelled, it just was really odd. Super paranoid about every little thing. Like, I just couldn't relax. Couldn't relax. I'm like, this isn't me. So and by the night show, my skin's ashy gray. I have no tanna, no pump, no nothing. Didn't even look full on stage at all. I looked like my first show. Like I stepped on stage for the first time.
Right. That's while it sounds like something that was strange, I've heard of people dealing with stuff like that all the time, and it's a terrible position to be in, because it's like all it does is make you more nervous. So like the more things go wrong, the more you get nervous and frustrated, and then in turn then you get more things happen to go wrong. So it's like almost like a catch-22.
My pro debut and everything is going snowball back down Mount Everest. I'm like, you're kidding me, like really? But hey, I mean, to place top 10, I placed 8th at my pro debut. To be on stage with those girls who have already been to the Olympia, I can't be upset with everything that happens to be at the top 10, my pro debut, and then to move up 2 placings to like my next show. I can't be mad.
Yeah. I mean, I think that speaks to your mental strength, though. Like, even though your body was going through that, you were able to kind of hone yourself to at least a point where you could perform, as best you can at that level. Often, like, we find that when athletes, some of the better athletes, they tend to be able to use like their mental fortitude to overcome physical issues, and that sounds like that's kind of what happened with you there. So
well, yeah, I didn't have a choice. I flew all the way to Atlanta to do my pro debut. It was either go to the hospital or get grounded and just push through it. So I mean, there's nothing I could have done with food or anything that could have helped me in 5 hours, whatever the time span was. So and I know I shouldn't have done the San Antonio Classic. I should have never done it, but I did it anyways. So I went up to places.
Right. So a lot of people think I was speaking earlier, many people understand that like men take performance enhancing drugs, right? And on a competitive level. And then also like some people understand, okay, well, a female bodybuilder looking like that, there's no way you can do that without, for the most part. But nobody really thinks of women that are, should I say, like more feminine or smaller. Like most people assume that they're 100% natural, which, we kind of disperse with that theory right now. But what would you say, like percentage wise, is there a use like in, let's say, bikini, right? Like what's the percentage of women that use performance enhancing drugs?
Um, Honestly, a big percentage. I would say at least 90%, but I
Hmm.
don't know. There's
Yeah.
some girls that are natural that look amazing. Carissa Upperman, or now Coleman, or whatever her last name is. She's all natural and she looks amazing. To build that type of physique with just food and water and salt and all that stuff on your own with no anabolics, that's impressive. Like, she's hardcore. I really respect someone who does that. But the people who do, I mean, the mentality going into the IFBB is, if I'm not on PEDs, I cannot reach my true potential. How am I going to do well compared to
Right.
these girls? You absolutely do not need performance enhancing drugs. You don't need them, but you consciously make that decision. Am I going to go down this route, or am I going to not go down this route?
Mhm.
But that's completely up to the person. I mean, I only saw winning. So I did whatever it took to get to where I'm at right now, as healthy as possible, even though it wasn't. But it's definitely achievable, especially at pro status, even being a natural pro in the IFBB internationally. It's completely normal to be off PEDs to even place top five, I think.
So you think that's a possibility, especially like in
Mhm.
a division like bikini, to be 100% natural and still do well?
Yeah, you can. Again, some of the girls, I don't know. I don't talk to some of these girls. I don't know
Sure.
what they do. I don't know
Sure.
their routines. But looking at the Olympia last year, the top five specifically, I mean, Janet finally used Anavar. Like, she finally figured out what Anavar was. And look at her now, she's Olympia, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm
Yeah.
looking at the other girls and I'm like, they're really not muscular. Like,
Mm.
Jennifer Dory's not muscular. Laura Lee's not muscular. They're just feminine. They have a great X frame. They don't have a lot of lean mass to them. They're dainty, they're bikini feminine. And it's a nice little touch to the top six, where I think last year, Issa, who's beautiful, don't get me wrong, her
Mm.
physique was amazing. But I don't think that level of muscle on bikini is where we're going now. Again, I don't know what the trend is because it's different all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
So
overall, I would say that the divisions are all getting more muscular. But so, would you agree with that?
yeah,
Yeah.
men's
So,
physique for sure. Men's physique is huge
mhm.
in mass wise. I
Yeah.
remember when like Steve Cook and Sadiq were like competing, and it wasn't to the level of mass that
Right.
now Brandon Hendrickson has. It's shifted.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like all the divisions are like moving towards that, because I mean, if you look at like bikini girls that are, years ago, you look at somebody like Ashley, who, I mean, right now, I mean, like you said, she's not gonna, very unlikely that she'll even top three. That's probably not gonna happen. So, and it's like the physiques have changed.
Yeah. I mean, she has a great amount of muscle. I mean, a lot of the girls do. Unfortunately, I personally just don't know what they want at that level. When you get to the Olympic level, I don't know what they're looking for. I just know that the X frame, everything has to be proportionate, rounder glutes, and I'm talking round glutes, not so much hamstring tie-in dominant. That was the difference between the girls' top six, was
Yeah,
how round their glutes were. That's why Janet went.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I,
So so you get through that panic attack, you compete, you do well. After that, were there any other like I guess consequences is probably the best word that I can come up with, but um, you know, having to do with that kind of prep.
Mhm. So there were consequences. I would say at the end of December is when things started going downhill that I just didn't have control over. So I tapered down, which you're always supposed to do off of your PED regimen. You're always supposed to taper down. It's like cut it in half or a third, work your way down to none, which I've always done. And then I don't know if I ate something weird, or if I would just was anxious that day or something, but something clicked at like towards the end of December, and I just felt like my body like crashed, like no thyroid function, no hunger cues. I was instantly swollen, just bloated, could not like get rid of it. Super achy, joints were so achy. It was, and I try to deal with it. I'm like, okay, I'm at the point where I stop and I fix it, or I go through it. And I was like, I think I'm at the point where, okay, I have to buckle in and I gotta go through this type of rebound. That's just the way I'm headed. I was working so much just to get my mind off of it. And then that created me to eat just a little, like more and more and more. And now cueing the anxiety, and here I am trying to stress eat, and all these things were building up, creating this giant snowball. And it's all just like unraveling and tumbling down. It got really bad, like February, March. I'm the heaviest I've ever been. I was 169. Like from being 116 on show day to 169, it's like, holy shit, like what the fuck?
Yeah.
But I couldn't control it. I couldn't. The stress was so high. The cortisol was just so much. I had no control over like my thoughts, my body responses. I didn't want to drink water. I hated the taste of water. I didn't want to eat, but I forced myself to eat because in the back of my head as an athlete, I'm like, okay, 6 meals in, let's build that metabolism. Let's get going.
Right.
So I'm doing all these things all at once and nothing's working, and it's just making it worse and worse. And the depression was probably worst I could say. And I'm trying not to cry because it was really a rough time for me to get through it, being in Texas by myself, like without my mom or anyone.
Right.
And just like sitting on the bathroom floor, like pressed against the door, and just like, do I call 911 or do I just go through it myself? Like it was just rough. I could never really catch my breath, and
Yeah.
I secluded myself. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't want to go to the gym. I cried at the thought of going to the gym, cried in the parking lot. I cried every day for 7 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I mean, that I can't even begin to comprehend, how difficult something like that, must have been. So I definitely sympathize. There's definitely something about depression, and then people, when they get depressed, want to seclude themselves. We hear that fairly often, but it's like one of the worst things that you can do, because they say that it causes, like, more depression, because it doesn't allow you to kind of get out of that cycle. Did you did you get any kind of medical assistance? Did you get blood work? Did you see like what was going on with your hormones, or were you just kind of monitoring by your symptoms?
So I got my blood work done in December, which is when everything first started.
Mhm.
And my T3 and T4 counts were not even on the range of being normal. They were so below normal. And I was not taking T3 at all. So I knew
Yeah.
that my stuff was messed up for sure. My MSH, I think, was high. And they never gave me my estradiol results, which I'm kind of upset about. But I just got my blood work done recently, I would say about a month ago. And my DHEA is like through the roof. My test is a little high. Then my LDL cholesterol is high. Everything else is normal, which,
Mhm.
considering having my thyroid numbers back to normal, which is a great sign. Because as a female, your thyroid goes, you are screwed. For
Yeah.
men, y'all have it so easy. Just take a little bit more test or this, and you're good to go. For females, there's so much more involved.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then after that, I just kind of monitored my symptoms. I mean, I would text my coach, Neil Cash at the time, and I'm like, dude, like, I don't want to be here. Like, he's like, how are you doing? He would text me every few hours. Like, I couldn't sleep. Had insomnia, but then again, I was working like 60 hours a week. So it was just a disaster.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That sounds terrible. Did you so you said your T3 was off, but you weren't taking T3. I wonder what that drop like is attributed to. Of course, I mean, I'm no endocrinologist. There's the way these I took a very basic anatomy and physiology class, and just the short window of a week or so that we had to study endocrinology. I mean, the way everything flows and moves and affects each other, it's so complicated that it's almost impossible to know, like, what's causing what.
And if
It's
one
a
thing goes wrong during one pathway, everything else is disrupted, and then it just creates this big ball of
right,
hysteria within
right.
your body. I don't know what's going on, but something is wrong.
Hmm.
But sorry, but no one else knows what's going on. I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen a few doctors, they don't even know what Anavar is. So it's
Right.
like, how do I get answers when I'm feeling this way and I don't know what to do? So I
Yeah.
just went off everything and just kind of let my body do its thing. And it was hard,
Uh,
hard. My mom would call me and she goes, "How are you doing?" And I would just cry because I
yeah.
was so frustrated. No diet, no nothing worked.
At what point did you notice like your depression started to get a little better, like started to, you know, subside a little bit?
My birthday was May 20th.
Hmm.
And my mom flew down to Texas to see me because she's never missed a birthday, never missed anything in my life. And, being with her and just kind of spending time with her, it loosened, of course, my mom being very her name is Karen, so she really is a Karen. And she was just so much. She's like, "You're so beautiful and it's just temporary." And like, "Mom, shut up. Like, shut the fuck up. Really. You're not helping me at all. I know you love me, but you're just not helping. You're making it worse." And I cried on my birthday because of her. But as soon as she left, this moment to me that happened, I just was like, I have nothing left to give. Like, I have no more fight in me. And as crazy as it sounds, I just gave the rest of it to God, really. I was like, "Dude, please, I have no other avenue to go down." And I just gave everything that I had left to God for real. And as soon as I kind of released all my like worries and pressures to that, I felt like I could breathe again. Just without even thinking, things were happening, but not by coincidence. Just things on the brighter side were happening. Like,
Right.
"Oh, I feel less bloated today," or, "Oh, I've had a really good day, like positivity wise," or just
Right.
great workout, something. So, and then I just kind of went with it. I said, "Okay, like I'm feeling better. I'm gonna go and do this," and I go outside more, and I'm back in the gym, and I feel like myself. And when I tell you, I gave it all to God, and without even thinking, things just felt better.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Well, there's a real benefit, true benefit to positive thinking, right? And, if positive thinking can definitely have a profound effect on people. And you can see it when you meet people, like people that tend to be negative. Everything is always like wrong. Everything's always a problem. Everything, and they never, they never have that outlet. And then when you're positive, it's like, it allows you to kind of live your life. It allows you to kind of see things in perspective, and so it it definitely is a beneficial, especially when you're dealing with something like depression. And I know that's easier said than done, because there's you can say, "Oh, well, be positive, start thinking positively," but it's not that you can't, it's not done like that, so
No, I went through that for about 7 months. I was so negative, like hated myself, wouldn't even look at myself in the mirror, hated waking up, hated going places, hated getting dressed. I was so full of hate and rage over something I couldn't like control that happened in the past.
mhm,
And I think because I wasn't competing and I was going through it, that I just didn't feel like I had a purpose. So that just tumbled into the deeper depression for me.
mhm,
Um, and then like I just started saying, I had a cup of coffee. This coffee is amazing. Best cup of coffee I ever had, like sensational. Or I would go outside to be raining. What a beautiful day. Or backed up highway in Houston. Oh, yes, love traffic. Love traffic in Houston. Gonna be late to work. It's gonna be a great day. Forcing myself to say these things that aren't true, but it changes the alchemical reaction in your brains to kind of make yourself believe that everything's great,
right,
everything's fine, and to shift from being so dark and twisty and gloomy to, more bright and positive. And once I started doing that, everything just felt easier.
right,
Like, okay, you went through it. It's going to take some time, probably the rest of the year, but now, it was just temporary,
mhm.
and your levels say that you're kind of back to normal. So if I can, take the progress that I'm doing now and just kind of run with it and see where I can go to step on stage next year, like I'm going to do it.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So you said that you might have not mentioned this, maybe I just inferred this, but you said that a lot of doctors don't even know what Anavar is. Have you spoken to like medical professionals and told them like this is what you were taking, or are you just, you're making that kind of claim from other experiences?
So back home, my doctor, I told her everything that was going on with
Mm-hmm.
me, like hormonal wise, and she just kind of looked at me like, okay, all right, well, let's go get your blood work done and let's do this. I'm like, okay, this was a waste of a trip. She doesn't even know what's anything.
Right, right. Yeah,
And then I flew down.
I was curious to know if you were ever like scorned by because doctors, as far as like the usage of PEDs and stuff, sometimes
Oh,
that happens to athletes.
no, she looked down at me. I was like,
Yeah,
well, I mean, oh well, it's in the past. I can't do anything
yeah.
about it. But help me get back on track. And she couldn't even do that. But I flew down to Texas and I had met a pharmaceutical rep who really helped me understand what tamoxifen really was. I mean, I knew what it was, but I
Mhm.
didn't know the effects that it had on women who are my age, 26, healthy, not cancer, like don't have cancer,
Mhm.
versus patients that do have breast cancer and do take this stuff and then come off of it for 5 years. The detox was the same. Every symptom from tamoxifen detox was the same versus me or someone who's been on it for 5 years with cancer. So he pretty much said it's going to be 3-4 months before you start to feel better. Like the metabolites still in my system for 40 milligram, whatever, for how long. And it took 3 months on the dot because I didn't get my period from June 2020 until March of this year. So as soon as that day happened, I
Wow.
got my cycle first time. I was like, okay, maybe, the metabolites are really out and I can kind of make progress. But there was a brief window where my cycles were horrible. And for
Hmm.
the whole month, I felt like I had my period all month long.
Right,
And
right.
then recently it started feeling normal. I'm like, okay, like that was the worst of it. Now let's, move forward. And it was rough,
Yeah.
but
So
now,
it was almost like you didn't have all those normal things that women have for that long, and now it's like once it was out of your system, you were making up for all that essentially.
it was I can't even tell which day was worse than the other, but feeling like you can't even, like, you don't have any control over your body.
Hmm.
You're so tired, your body aches, and you're like, I just went for a walk yesterday and I feel like I'm gonna die. So that
Yeah.
was me every day. And now, since I started on a new diet training program to kind of, get back to where I was, to lose the weight and like get to a stable like maintenance so I
Hmm.
can eat next year healthy.
Right.
It was a harsh transition from stage to rebound to now back to being normal. So
Right. Right. Yeah. So what does your regimen look like now? Like what are you doing to try to get that weight off and get to a level where you can be competitive again?
so I am on a carb cycle right now. So 3 days of lower carbs, as in 40 grams of carbs in the morning, and then 100 grams for my 4 meals during the day, and at night I think it's 40 again. So that's my low carb setup for 3 days in a row, and then I'll do a high carb day. Um, and it's a lot of food for me because there were some days where I just wouldn't eat because I wasn't hungry. So me
Mhm.
trying to put all this food in 6 times a day is kind of hard in the beginning, as it was when I first started. But the training in the gym was most important for me because if I felt like myself in the gym, then I could actually get the food in and actually feel like it's being used properly.
Yeah.
So once I found myself in the gym again, the eating just came back to normal. And I prefer this type of method because not being on a regimen like this and weighing out your food, your body doesn't like it. My body did not like it. A
Mhm.
sip of water or a sip of like lemonade or something off like plan that I haven't had for years,
Mhm.
my body was super sensitive to it. So I couldn't
Yeah.
eat chicken for 6 months. I couldn't eat this for like whatever it was for 6 months. And then finally I'm like, okay, like I want chicken and rice now. I want shrimp. I want
Mhm.
this. Plain as it is, it's easier to obviously see progress, but your body likes it better. Your body doesn't like all that garbage. And I put garbage in it.
Right.
It
Yeah.
didn't like me. It did not like me.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that. So now you're progressing forward. Have you noticed like significant changes at this point?
For
In
me, it's significant. Even though it was like 2 pounds from when I started, the circumference and the bloating and just the quality of life that I have is a huge, huge difference for me. And that's progress.
Yeah.
So if I can continue doing what I'm doing and just really put my head down and keep going where I'm going, the next 4 months, a huge change.
Well, and also I'm sure seeing that progress from a mental standpoint also gives you like ability to continue being positive, if as long as you're going the right direction, right? As long as you're not moving backwards. And I think that's a big, big key there too. So
I mean, no one's invincible in this sport. And that's what a lot of people like really misconstrue. I know some girls who just started competing that are so afraid of gaining weight post show that I'm like, you're not really gonna make progress in this sport if you're afraid of losing weight. So I can see where having a eating disorder or a body dysmorphia syndrome, that's where it starts right there. That's where it starts. And then it just kind of like depends on where you go, it gets worse or better.
Yeah. So, what's your plan as far as, competition? Are you thinking like next year? Are you thinking,
Definitely
next year?
I don't have a choice but to wait till next year because I'm not stepping on stage unless I am 100% in the right mental state and right physical state, because I didn't get all this messed up just to mess myself up all again. So I'm going to do it safer with caution, and really try to shoot for, first a pro win. That would be awesome. And then hopefully step on the Olympia stage.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? And I mean, I definitely think you can do it. I saw some of your competition pics. I mean, I definitely think you could easily be up there. So with the effects that you've had, with the issues and everything that you had to go through, I know you said you wanted to do it safer. Did you already kind of in your mind have an idea of how you're gonna progress to your, on your next prep? Are you still going to use tamoxifen? Are you, were you specific right at this point? Or you just kind of, you'll see when you get there?
So I am kind of we'll see when we get there, but I'm not taking tamoxifen. Like I don't want to mess with it really again. As far as anything else, I'm open to it. I'm not going to not use steroids ever again. But I'm starting from the ground up as far as bodybuilding. So I'm going into this prep and starting like this transition back to being an actual like athlete,
right?
From ground zero. So I'm going to relearn everything. I'm going to relearn how to prep and how to train and break down my training and try new things and approach this prep in a totally different, not mindset, but a different plan versus how I was doing it before. So I always put my trust in my coach at the time. So I just did everything he said. And I think that at this point, because the chapter is closed and a new one is starting, let's start fresh and start from the ground up. And that comes with like training programs, like push, pull, leg, rest. Those are being, torn down and built up again. The food, definitely more food options versus what I was just eating. Like, I don't really want to eat tilapia because I was for 20 weeks straight. I wasn't allowed anything else with no fats. I don't want to look at tilapia ever again. So like chicken or more cod or safer options for me. So
yeah, cod's a good fish. I like cod. I just had some cod yesterday.
Expensive.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about like fish. Sometimes like the better fish tends to be more expensive. Like I love salmon, but salmon is extremely expensive. If you're getting it from a like legitimate, place. So, but especially if you get like not farm raised, that becomes like really expensive. So, but anyways, that's another story. That's another topic.
It's another topic.
Yeah. So I guess, at this point, you don't have like a specific body part that you're going to be focused on or anything because you're so far off from your last show and this whole process happened. You're just trying to build yourself back up to a point where you can, step on stage with a good, solid package. That's my understanding.
A well-rounded physique. I mean, my knowing that I already knew what my feedback was going to be from my show, but it was just a fuller glutes and just a nice fuller quad sweep, which really, if you're just going to tell me, I just need to be fuller. I needed, I had nothing. I was flabby. I had skin flabbing and water pulled over
Mhm.
but yeah, I'm gonna have a well-rounded physique, but taking that judgment from my 2020 competitions and just kind of doing that from
Yeah. Are you
scratch.
going to be working with the same coach that you had?
From before Chicago, no, I will not. I do have a coach right now.
You do what? I'm sorry. I couldn't hear that
I have a
last
new,
part. You have a new
sorry, I have a new coach.
coach. Got it. Got it. So this would be your first prep with your new coach.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So, well, I wish you all the best.
I hope you will.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your experience. This is not an easy subject to talk about, especially when you're talking about things that first of all nobody really talks about, especially when we're talking about women and especially women, in the lighter divisions, and also, of course, the depression. It's people are tend to be more open nowadays, but it's still a subject that's kind of underemphasized, especially in athletics, and bodybuilding as a whole. So,
Yeah, I think that because people choose bodybuilding, it's because they want to be better. So I know a lot of stories where addiction is their why, like they come from addiction or they came from like gang or whatever it is, or drugs or eating disorders. And this is a great sport to like really put your heart and soul into if you want
mhm,
to get out of that type.
yeah,
But in terms of like depression and stuff, this sport really does teach you and it takes you to the depths of your conscious. And
mm,
sometimes it's really scary, like it's super scary. But you learn so much more about yourself that maybe you wouldn't have known like a couple months back. So I'm all
right.
for it.
Right, right. Well, I mean, definitely, you can't be better without going through trials. So you obviously went through some serious trials. So, well, yeah, I look forward to seeing you on stage and wishing you all the best and your Olympia qualification. So,
I hope so.
yeah.
I didn't go through all this for nothing, you know?
There you go. That's right. That's
No,
right.
appreciate it. Thank you for having me on here and taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, you take care. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You do
Mhm.
you as well.
All right. Bye.